everyone, and welcome. I'm Tatev, your host and event coordinator here at Product Management Advisor PMA, and I'm so excited to welcome you to today's live event. From idea to impact, how a non-traditional founder brought PointsPath to life. At PMA, we are all about spotlighting real stories from real builders, not just the polished case studies or corporate success stories, but the raw, honest journeys of people figuring it out as they go. We know product management doesn't always start with the title. Sometimes it starts with the problem you just can't ignore. That's why today's conversation is so special. We are joined by Julian, founder of PointsPath, a Chrome extension that's already helping over 75,000 users make smarter decisions with their travel and reward points. Julian's background isn't in engineering, and he didn't come up through the traditional product management track. Instead, he saw a gap, had an idea, and took action, learning how to think and operate like a PM along the way. Before we dive into Julian's stories, here's a quick look at today's agenda. From idea to MVP, how Julian validated his concept and built a working product without a technical background. Learning to think like a PM, how he picked up product thinking, frameworks, and decision-making without formal training. Next, tools, decisions, and the founder hustle. What tools he used, how he collaborated with the devs, and what drove his scrappy execution. Feedback loops, growth, and product market fit. How Julian approached user feedback, iteration, and scaling to over 75,000 users. Career advice, live Q&A, closing remarks. Key takeaways for aspiring PMs and solo builders, followed by your questions. Whether you are a founder, aspiring PM, or someone just curious about what it really takes to bring a product to life, you are in the right place. And before we kick things off, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the reason we are all here. Ross, the founder of PMA, he built this community to give product thinkers and builders access to stories, insights, and support that feels real, not rehearsed. Today's session is a perfect reflection of what that mission is. So with that, Ross, I will pass it over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Tatev, for kicking us off and giving us that nice welcome. And hello to everyone, and thank you for tuning in. Before we start the session, I'd like you to think if you've ever thought to yourself, I have an idea, but I'm not sure if I'm ready. Or I have an idea, but I don't think I have the right skill. Then I think you'll find, if that was you, I think you'll find today's learning event with my friend Julian Kheel very inspiring. If you tuned into other sessions, you may have heard me talk about the T skill, right? The T skill is where the horizontal line, which represents all of the product management skill sets, and it's very important and helpful to have a very broad horizontal line. Also very important for the T skill is the vertical line. So Julian has the vertical line. In fact, I don't know anyone more informed and knowledgeable in the travel reward points program than Julian Kheel. But Julian was missing the horizontal line. He didn't have product experience in his past. There were no boot camps, no product certifications that I'm aware of, no experience shipping software, and no product teams. What he did have was a compelling idea and the curiosity and confidence to drive it to a solution. And he had the courage to figure it out along the way. So as PMs, we talk a lot about roadmaps, frameworks, and best practices, but underneath all of that, this job is about solving problems and creating value. And Julian's story is a powerful reminder of how far passion and execution can take you. So I was really excited about this session. I've spoken with Julian in the past. I know his story, and I wanted all of you to also hear his story because it's an inspiring story. Before we get into it, Julian, Tatev gave us a nice introduction. Do you want to take a minute to just tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely, yeah. First of all, Ross, I'm thrilled to be here. We've had such great discussions, you and I, so I'm really excited to talk to your audience today and talk about my journey. Everything you said in your intro is exactly right. I've never done product before in my life before this. I actually came from content. For actually the 20 or 30 years, I was entirely in content. I started as a writer and director in television and film. I was in Hollywood for about 15 years. And then after that, I was writing about travel rewards and travel and finances and things like that. So my entire career has been content, never product. So this really was a huge change for me. And we'll dig into, how the journey has gone.
Yeah, great. So let's start at the beginning. A good place to start because every product has a story and a problem to solve. So where did the idea of PointsPath originate? And what was the specific pain point or aha moment for Julian there?
So a lot of people know what frequent flyer miles are, right? And a lot of people hear the phrase frequent flyer miles and they think, oh, those are complicated. I can never find flights I want to use my miles on. They're a waste of time. For the last 10 years of my career, my job on the content side of things has been to try and help people see how they can use their miles. And I did that. I started, this was back in 2008 or 2006, somewhere in there. I started by writing about points and miles and frequent flyer miles on small blogs, small specialized blogs that covered this sort of thing and said, here's how you do it. Here are the tricks. Here are the tips. Here are all the loopholes of how you use your miles effectively. And over the last 10 years then, not only did that space grow into a fairly big space it is today, but I grew along with it as well. I was eventually hired as a writer by a site called The Points Guy, which is to this day the largest site that covers travel rewards in the world. Then I was an editor there. Eventually I was running this site. I was an editorial director there. And then from there I was actually hired by CNN to do the same thing for them. They were launching their e-commerce section called CNN Underscored and wanted to cover travel rewards and credit cards and how that all worked together. So they brought me over and I was there for 3 years launching that section. Through it all, the problem has always been, like I said, people don't know how to use their miles best, but and what I was doing in content was really education, right? Trying to educate people how to do it. But it takes a long time to do that because you have to really dig into multiple articles, stories, videos, whatever it might be. And you really have to do some homework to understand it. And through it all, I thought it would be wonderful if there was a way with technology that we could solve this problem for people so they didn't have to spend hours digging through a blog or a website or wherever it is, where they could say, hey, I want to travel to this place. Should I use my miles or not? And if so, how do I use my miles? And push a button basically and get the answer without having to spend all that time. That's where the idea for PointsPath came about, is how can we solve this problem for people of knowing how to use their miles. And also the other section of that is, even if I can use my miles on a particular flight, should I? Am I getting a good deal with them? Or should I save them for later and use cash in this point? That's the other question that people always wonder the answer to. So that's where the idea for PointsPath came about. And it went through many permutations then from that point onwards, and we can talk a little bit about those, but that's where the general idea became.
Okay. And as a guy with a content background, before any code was written, what were you thinking in terms of how would you validate that this idea was worth pursuing? I mean, it sounds like all ideas sound great in concept and in theory, but then there comes a point in time where, okay, I need to put some skin in the game here. So how do you validate that the idea was going to be something that was worth pursuing?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So obviously, I had, well, there were three pieces to it. First, I had my own intuition of, hey, I know I would want this. Now that's, you got to be careful with that, because just because you want it doesn't mean there's a lot of people who want it. But that's a place to start, right? I think a lot of founders start with, okay, well, I have this problem and I would love a solution to it. But that's just step one. Then you have to further validate it. The second step was, I knew from my years of doing it that this was a problem that other people had. Not necessarily validating the solution, but that it was in fact a problem that other people experienced because they came to sites like the Points Guy and like CNN to find answers. So it was clearly a problem, and those sites also get millions of readers into these sections. So it's a big problem. The third part, which I think is really what you're getting to, is how do you validate the solution? And what I did actually is I did interviews. I did customer interviews. I did two pieces to it. I had a survey that I sent out. I used a platform that you may or may not know called Prolific, which is a really terrific platform for doing surveys. Basically, they provide the audience. You can basically choose, oh, I want to talk to boomers, or I want to talk to people making $100,000 or more, or whatever it might be. I want to talk to people who travel a lot, and you can even pre-qualify them with your own survey. So I actually pre-qualified, I think it was 600 people who had at least 10,000 miles in 3 or more frequent flyer or hotel programs. So I started with that. I pre-qualified 600 people and then surveyed them about what their problems were and what they wanted to, how they would like to be helped. And then from there, I selected about 12 of them and actually did Zoom interviews, about 30-minute Zoom interviews with them, where we talked through how did they book, how did they go about searching for flights, where were their pain points. And a couple of those later ones, as I was developing the idea, I actually had mock-ups to show them, and showed them something and said, hey, so if you had something like this, is this something, what would you think of this? How would you use this tool? Where would you want this tool to be? So it was actually a multi-month process to do all that. What's really great is it really didn't cost that much. I would say that maybe all in was $1,000, the whole thing, maybe that much to do all of that, the surveying and everything. So it is definitely something that anybody can do, and the tools are very easy to use. Prolific is extremely easy. You can tie it to any other survey tool that you want. You can tie it to Qualtrics, you can tie it to SurveyMonkey. And then they also provide, again, the option for you to recontact those same people you surveyed and invite them to do an in-person interview. And we provided, what works great about Prolific is that they then pay their users. The people that you talk to and you interview get paid, and that's what you're paying Prolific for. It's part of what you pay them. So everybody wins. Everybody gets something for it. That's basically how I went through my discovery process of saying, okay, I do think that I know there's a problem here, and I think that this is the solution based on what I've learned from these folks.
All right. So I think that we know that we established that you didn't come from a product background, and you started you had the idea, you took the steps to get some user feedback, collect some data to validate your idea. I guess the next step would be not coming from a product background. How did you make that transition? So you had the concept, you did your validations. So, what does a businessman like you do at this point now? Because now you're going to start stepping into the water.
Yeah.
And now you have to start building. So how do you make that? Let's talk about that transition. Now going from, concept validation, now we want to start, designing an actual solution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that is exactly the next step. And again, I wasn't funded, so this was all coming out of my pocket. So I didn't want to spend a lot of money on building, I wouldn't even call it an MVP, I would call it a prototype of saying, okay, I believe this is something that is worth taking a look at, worth building, worth trying. How do I build a prototype to, one, see if it'll work, and then two, see if it's something people are actually going to want? So what I did, I didn't have any designers or anything like that. I didn't really know much about coding. I actually took a little online course about coding. And so now I like to say I know just enough about it to be dangerous. I was convinced by some advisors, some friends of mine, that I should not try and code it myself because that was probably not a good use of my time, and they were right. So what I did do, and again, trying to keep the cost of this to a minimum, is I hired a couple of freelancers to do it, a couple of freelance coders off of, I think it wasn't Fiverr, it was the other big freelance site. Hired a couple of them, and they, they're overseas guys, which is, you find a lot there, especially on the engineering side. They were extraordinarily inexpensive, to the point that I actually hired two of them to do the same thing. I actually hired two of the guys because we talked it through and they gave me an estimate and all that. And the estimate was so cheap for both of them, I mean, literally a couple $100, that I said, okay, I'm going to greenlight both of you. I mean, I didn't tell the other that they were doing it, but I was like, okay, I'm going to have both of you build the same thing. What the prototype was, let me back up for a second. So PointsPath is a Chrome extension. Actually, we just launched Safari as well, so now it's a browser extension that runs on top of Google Flights. So basically, when you do a search in Google Flights, our extension retrieves all the points prices for those same flights and then adds them in next to the cash prices and tells you which is the better deal for each flight. So from a prototype standpoint, I wanted to, one, validate that I could actually do that, could actually run on top of Google Flights as an extension. I was pretty sure I could do that because I had seen others do it for other reasons. Two, that I could pull the points prices from the airlines. And then three, that I could make it all work in a timely manner, that you didn't want to sit there waiting for 30 seconds for it to load, of course. So the prototype was to validate those three things from a pure build perspective. And I had two different guys do it. I had one guy build one, and with just one airline program to start. So I had one guy build United, and I had one guy build Delta. And they both succeeded, but the Delta one was a mess. It basically was like opening other tabs and doing all sorts of weird things, but it worked. And I think it took about 30 to 40 seconds to get the answers, but it worked. But the United one worked very well. The United one didn't do any of that. It all worked within seamlessly. And the answers came up in maybe 5 to 7 seconds. And so I said, oh, all right, that looks like it'll work. That validates that I can build this. So from there, I actually, I was going to continue with that coder, but then he became unavailable for some reason. So this is where my dangerous coding skills came into play. I dug into what he had written and managed to copy and paste what he had done to work with the two other big US airlines, Delta and American. So I was basically able to copy and paste what he had done and make it work for all three of them. And again, it was wonky, it was slow, it was, because it was all copy and pasted, and it was, if you read through the code, it was a kind of a mess, but it worked. So then I had what I would almost consider an MVP. It really was an MVP. It was something that I could at least take out to people. So I launched it. I launched it purely on an invite-only basis. In Chrome, in the web store, you can say, I don't want this to be publicly listed. I'm going to provide the link to people I actually want to try it, and only they'll be able to use it. So that's what I did to start validating whether the MVP itself was something that people wanted. I would create a very basic web page that just said, a waiting list essentially. And then I started inviting people in, 10 at a time to download it and try it. And then surveyed those people again to say, all right, what do you think? Is this something you'd want to use or not? So that is the process of which I got a first version of this built and validated.
All right, so you released the beta version, and so how do you go about now? So you're collecting feedback from the invited users to see what they like, what they didn't like, what they would like to see next. So how do you go about collecting that feedback, documenting the feedback and prioritizing your next features that you're going to be putting into this product or this solution, and scoping your MVPs, or and then what you do next with your technical support team. Like, so the coder who delivered the United solution, he went on to something else. So how do you find the right developers? So
Yeah.
I think a lot there. So prioritizing features, collecting the feedback, prioritizing features, and building a technical team.
Yeah, that's exactly where we're at in this point in the story, right? So I'd gotten to this point through little of my own elbow grease and a little help from Fiverr or whatever it was. But right, you're at the point now where you're like, all right, I need to. And by the way, a lot of the tools as far as getting the feedback. Let me cover that part of your question first. Those tools you can use, those tools are really actually very friendly and very easy to use. And I was able to use them on my own, learn them on my own. And when I say what tools are those, I'm talking about MailChimp for emailing people, for being in touch with people. I'm talking about, I can't even remember what we used for just the basic web page that was just literally a splash page collecting addresses. Oh, I think I found a template of somewhere. I think I bought a $10 web page waiting list template and launched it. That all it did was it had some sort of a travel background, some sort of a destination, a PointsPath logo that I had made myself, and put your email address in. We'll keep you informed when it is, and then connecting that to my MailChimp waiting list. I was actually able to do that all by myself. And you really can, if you just take a little time and a little research, the tools are out there that you can do that all by yourself. You really don't need a coder for that. Now, it's a very simple thing, but it worked. And then the other piece of it was, again, the surveying, and that was involved tying MailChimp to Qualtrics. There are other survey platforms, but I think Qualtrics actually does a really great job and is used by a lot of professionals because it's just very good at assembling all the data, and it's very easy to read it and understand it and really analyze it. So I had built a flow, and again, I did this all myself in MailChimp. Again, it's not hard if you take a little time to understand it and study it, so that a user, after they got invited into to download PointsPath, after a day or two would get a follow-up email, and a few days later would get a survey and say, hey, would you help us out by completing this survey? It'll take you 10 minutes or whatever it is. And then that would kick over into Qualtrics and open up the Qualtrics survey. And I had it all tied together pretty well, and it all worked so that I could even see who had done what and what step that they were on. So that's how I collected the feedback and figured out like what would people want next. Now, to the second part of your question, as far as actually continuing to build the product, now we're beyond what I can do myself, right? I know just enough code to be dangerous, and I kind of reached the limits of what I could do coding-wise by myself. I could do these other tools that would collect feedback and such, but I couldn't really continue to code. And by the way, I think today this is a little bit different with AI. I'm not convinced that AI can completely replace coders. In fact, I don't think it can, but it is a tool where maybe if that was the case 2 or 3 years ago, maybe I would have taken a stab at doing it with AI. I don't know. I'm not sure that would work for my use case, but maybe it would have back then. But in any case, it was time to start building a team, a technical team. And so I actually went and this is about, I have found over the time I've been doing this that you get the best people by through other people that you know, and shaking the trees of your network. And that's what I did. And that's where I have gotten almost everybody who is currently on my team, all of which have been now with me for at least a year, some of them 2. And that's really where you get the best people, is by talking to other people who know coders, who say this person is good, and you know this person is a quality person. So that's how I did. That's how I built my team. Everybody has been a freelance contractor to this point. We're actually getting ready to bring some people on full-time for the very first time, but everyone has been a contractor to this point, so they have other gigs that they're doing in addition to mine, and that was exactly what I needed. I didn't need a full-time person. I needed a few people working part-time to put it all together. So that's what I did. And that is where we were then able to build out the product further, to the point that we launched it publicly. And that was in January of last year. So January of 2024, we dropped the splash page, put up an actual home page, and actually launched it publicly, and that got us on our official journey.
And so we already started digging into the how. So, you know, as far as tools and platforms, did you leave that to the developers? So like how much were you able to provide the developers in terms of the vision, and how did you do that?
So you're talking about, so I think there's 2 pieces of that question, right? So there's product vision, and there's then technical platforms, right? When it came to technical platforms, I really let them drive the bus, because I don't know. And also they're the ones who are going to be working in those platforms, so they should choose what they are, you know, want to use. And frankly, I think a lot of those platforms are pretty standard. You know, I think most coders are using GitHub as a repository. I think, you know, everybody codes in whatever they're using at home, whether it's VSC or whatever. And by the way, I should mention, my entire team has been remote the entire time. I have people all around the world. I think it's silly at this point to insist that people be in a local area, because, you know, if you say, oh, you know, I happen to be in New York, if I said, well, I can only hire coders from, you know, who are here within whatever 20, 30 miles of me, I've eliminated now literally about 99% of the talent on the planet. And that just seems silly to me. You know, especially given that the tools are so friendly to remote at this point. It's so easy to see what people are doing, even if they're working on different time zones. I don't want to get too sidetracked, but just as an example, when I have, again, I have people working in India, I have people working in on the Pacific West Coast, I have people all over the place in Europe. Our platform, our internal stack, is designed so that when somebody does something, makes a change to the code, and submits a PR for review in GitHub, then there's a ping in our Slack instance that automatically happens, that then automatically pings to my phone, that I can then look at and say, oh, okay, this feature is up ready for review, you know, or whatever it's been working on. So, and this can all happen when I'm sleeping. You know, again, if folks in India are working while I'm asleep here, when I first did it, when I first put all this team together, I was amazed, because I'd wake up in the morning and there'd already be 5 things done. And I was like, that's amazing. Like, why wouldn't everybody want to do that? You haven't even gotten your cup of coffee, and you already have a whole bunch of stuff already, you know, ready to go. So I think the stacks are so easy now to put together and use, that there's really no reason to not be open to people working remotely and working from all around the world, because there's talent in places that you maybe not know personally, but they're there. So that's that. And so from a product vision standpoint, though, that remained with me. And I think this goes back to sort of what you were talking about at the beginning, which is as far as the vertical versus the horizontal. And you're right, I had to learn sort of the horizontal, but the vertical I really had strongly. You know, I don't like to toot my own horn, but there's not too many people who know travel rewards better than I do. And to be able to bring that kind of subject matter expertise really I was able to combine that with the feedback I got from users to really direct product vision in a way that I think nobody else on the team could, because they just didn't know the subject matter. They didn't know, they might know a little bit about travel or whatever, but you know, travel and frequent flyer points and all, like I said at the beginning, is very complicated, and the way the airlines work is very complicated, and you have to sort of understand what's the difference between an operating carrier and a marketing carrier and whatever it might be. There's a lot of nuances to it, and it really does require somebody with subject matter expertise. And again, having also not just talked to these users, not just gotten feedback from these users, but also having lived it for over a decade of talking and dealing with folks who were trying to maximize their miles, I had a pretty good idea of what they wanted, you know, and a lot of that had already been validated. So at that point, I felt pretty confident about saying, all right, my vision has been good up to this point. I'm pushing forward, like I'm going to go. And look, we've done probably a couple of things where it's like, yeah, you know, that was all right received. We haven't had anything that we had to like kill or anything like that, but we've had a couple of things where it's like, yeah, that gets a little used, but not maybe as much as it was worth the effort or whatever. But overall, we've been right more than we've been wrong. And I think that's also what it's about. Like, nobody's going to bat 1,000. You have to, you know, try things. Yeah, and that's what we've really tried to do.
Yeah, I think that's true in any product development. There's going to be, you know, swings and misses. You have to flex. You have to be fluid. You were strong on the vertical, and as we mentioned, there's the technical side. How did you handle, like, was there any uncertainty in terms of communicating your vision to the technical side so that they were going to develop, you know, what you were communicating to them? Like, was there a gap there? And how did you handle that?
So this is actually where I lucked out. I don't know if I lucked out, but it worked out very well. I did very early on, after the prototype stage, but before the MVP, bring on a product designer. I brought on a designer, just again, freelance part-time. And I brought someone on specifically that I knew from the past, from having worked with this person at the Points Guy, where they were on the product side and I was on the content side. So I knew they knew the space and knew the subject matter. And so that I could communicate with the designer in a language that we both spoke. So that worked out very well, because then once you have the mock-ups, then it's easy to take those to the tech team and say, this is what we want. This is how we want it to work. So I actually, and I don't think I realized when I did that how important that was going to be. That having that designer who could speak the same language as me was going to be a real value add, because I wasn't going to have to explain to them how the system worked, in addition to then explaining what I wanted. They already understood how the system worked and what I was sort of going for. Now today I have designers who don't necessarily know the space, but that's okay, because we already have the product. So we already know if you're building on top of what already works, then it's easier to explain to everybody because they can just see it. But at that point where we didn't have anything, it was really important to have that person who could understand what I was saying and translate it into visual language to then show that to people who could turn it into a technical product. So yeah, if you're doing this and you have a designer, you know someone who has design skills, who knows what you're talking about, try and grab them.
I mean, it's a big problem, you know, communicating plain English into, you know, tech speak. There's often a gap there. And it was my next question was, you know, what critical decisions do you think you were up against or you made during the process? And it sounds like hiring the designer was a critical decision that worked out and was important for you.
Yep. Yeah, a couple of things. That was one, definitely. Releasing an MVP invite only was a big one because we were
Mhm.
able to, because the other thing, right, you have to remember, and this is something I didn't know when I started and I know now, the product you build for 10 people probably isn't going to work for 1,000 people. And the product you released for 1,000 people probably isn't going to work for 100,000 people, right? Those are very different levels of scale, and you kind of have to plan ahead for that because you don't want to be rebuilding your product every step of the way. So that was being able to bring people in at first on a controlled basis when we had an MVP that really probably, if we had thrown 100,000 people of it, probably would have, collapsed right on the spot. Bringing them in, being able to bring them in on a controlled basis and using that waiting list really helped us, was a critical decision. The other thing I did that really helped, because you say, okay, well, great, yeah, you're going to create a waiting list, and you're going to bring people in on a small basis. Where are all these people going to come from? Like, where are you going to, how are you going to get these people on the waiting list? One thing you can do is you can do a sort of a paid marketing thing if you wanted to spend a few bucks on it, something through Facebook or Instagram, and say, hey, we're developing this product, put your name on the waiting list, and it's all very automated. But we were able to do it without spending any money because I reached out to an influencer friend of mine. And this goes back, this is also something where I've learned my skills and network from my time in content have been very useful in this product journey because I'm able to bring people in and I know their skills and what they can bring to the table and have them as a value add to what I'm doing. So I reached out to a travel influencer friend of mine on social media who literally did a short, I think 30-second TikTok video just showing like how the MVP worked with the 3 airlines and talking about, oh, this thing's great. If you want to sign up, go here to the waiting list. And we gave him a little extra. We said we put in a code, a VIP code, so that he could say, if you use my code, we'll move you to the top of the waiting list. We ended up with 18,000 people on the waiting list after about a week from that one video. And as far
Wow.
as moving people up to the top, since there were, other than those 18,000, there was only maybe another 500 people. So they were all at the top. So the 500 people that didn't have the code were at the bottom. But it was okay because we, over a period of a month, got everybody in. So that's how we built our waiting list. And we really were able to do it with just one video. But again, picking the right person to do that video. You could do it with paid marketing. You could do it. It would take a little longer and it would cost some money. Probably wouldn't cost you a ton. But you could do it that way, but we were able to do it organically. So that was also a critical decision as far as those first steps. And then realizing there was a point at which you had to say, all right, we got to throw the doors open. You can sit in beta / MVP / waiting list for as long as you want, but at some point you got to say, all right, we're ready. We've grown to the point we got to go. It's time to go. And
So
you
these were
Mhm. Go ahead.
so these were the signals that helped you realize that you were starting to hit a market fit, right? And you were heading in the right direction. So now it's time to open the doors.
That's right. Exactly. Like the slide says, product market fit. We were pretty confident at that point that we had at least a pretty good inkling of product market fit based on the feedback we were getting from our MVP users, the interest from this TikTok influencer, and the fact that also, when we invited people to install, which sometimes might be 3 or 4 weeks after they had signed up, they showed up. They did it. Not all of them. Some of them didn't. Some of them did not. But a big enough portion of them did that by the time we threw open the doors in January, we had about 5,000 installed users already on the MVP. But yeah, you have to sort of say, okay, it's time. Like it's time to grow up. It's time to throw open the doors. And you can message it to people and say, look, this is an early version. In our welcome email, it said, this is an early version. It's going to have some bugs. Please let us know, if you find them. And you got to watch that feedback as well. People will email you. People will reach out and tell you when something's wrong. not all of them, but enough of them, then, I know when something is wrong in my product when I get more than 3 emails about the same thing in a short period of time. If I get 3 emails from 3 different people that say, hey, I'm having trouble logging in, something has gone wrong with my login. Because those 3 people represent probably 30 or even 300 people, the ones that are actually writing in. So you really got to watch those emails too. Even though you get a lot of junk and you have to kind of dig through it all, you really got to watch those emails. So anyway, those were, I would say, the critical decisions that we made early.
And it's so true what you say, because I classify myself as a customer-centric product manager. I've been that way my whole career. I learned early on when I was cutting my teeth, you really have to listen to the customer and not just, hear them talk, but understand what they're saying. And I think if you do that well, you'll deliver a product that the customers love. And when you have a product that the customer loves, you'll have a loyal customer. So I just want to move it along a little bit, but before we go to the next section, I just want to ask you, how do you get to 75,000 users? Or maybe you're more than that now.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, so actually we're at 85,000 now.
I have to
The info I sent you a little while ago is a little out of date now. Yeah, we're at 85,000 now. We have been very, very fortunate because we have done all of that without paid marketing. It has all been word of mouth and earned media, which is basically, outlets writing about you that are not that you're not paying to do so. This is, and I put that to 2 different things. One is, I think we found something that really had product market fit. We were fortunate to find it fairly quickly. And so when you do have something, people want it. Now, that doesn't mean you still don't have to get the word out. Of course you do, right? There may be I'm sure there are products out there that I would love to use that would be perfect for me that I don't know about, right? Because I just don't know. So there does have to be some sort of, how do you get the word out? This then goes back, and I just mentioned it earlier, of how I was able to use the skills and network that I developed in my years in content to then help me here on the product side. Because when we did open the doors in January of 2024 and sort of make it public, I wrote up a little press release, which I knew how to do because I had done it. I didn't have a publicist. I just wrote it up, and I sent it to everybody who had ever worked for me in content. And I was fortunate because all of those people who had worked for me have since, in the years since, gone on to become higher level people at other sites. So within the first month, we were in Travel and Leisure. We were on The Points Guy. We were on, Thrifty Traveler, these deal sites. We were covered because I knew who to reach out to. And this is, what I would call one of my unfair advantages that I have over some of my competitors, is that I can pull that lever when I need to and say, hey, we've got this great new thing. You should, I think it might be worth your time writing about it. And I also know from experience when not to bother them, when to say, yeah, this is not going to be of interest to them. I don't want to burn, reach out to that bridge. So so that was a big way that we grew our audience and grew our people to know about it. Here is though, because obviously not everyone watching is not going to necessarily have 10 years of a content network. So you might say, well, that's good for you, Julian, but how do I do that? You can do this yourself. It will take longer, but you can do it. And this goes again back to the vertical. And really, I do think that a founder, unless you're a technical founder, if you're a product founder, basically a subject matter founder, you really have to know what you're doing, like know about the area you're building for. You really should be an expert at what you're building. And if you're not, become one. Become one as you build it. Whatever product you've built, you are going to collect email addresses, right? That's almost inevitable. Don't just let those email addresses sit. Talk to those people. We very quickly, no, actually not very quickly, it took us a little while, started emailing folks. And we started emailing folks. First, we started emailing folks just about the product when we had a new, feature to roll out or whatever. That was sort of it. But then we were only emailing them maybe twice a month or something. And then we started emailing them with more information about points and miles and about travel. And so then we were emailing them once a week. And then we were emailing twice a week. And now we're emailing them every other day. And in August, we're going to start emailing them daily. When you do that, people remember you. They re-engage with you. That email ad contact, that first-party email contact is incredibly valuable. And a lot of people collect these addresses and then don't do anything with them. And I was guilty of it myself. I didn't use it enough early on. When people remember you, not only do they re-engage with your product, but they also tell other people about it when they have re-engaged. So all of that helps to build up, and it takes time. We're at 85,000 now. Like I said, I think we were about 5,000 when we started. So it's taken about 18 months to get to 85,000 or at 80,000. Sometimes some days it grows big and some days it grows small. Most days it grows. But it does take time. We've actually grown faster than I think a lot of places. We've been fortunate at that, but it takes time, and you just have to be patient and keep plotting and keep growing and see every opportunity that you can to get the word out.
Okay. That's great advice, and that leads us to our next section. What advice would you give to aspiring product managers or solo builders, like yourself, someone like yourself, who feel like they're not qualified to start, or they're not ready, or they don't have a certification? What advice would you give to someone like that?
So that's easy. Just do it. Just do it. Don't wait. Waiting you will never get it done if you wait. You just do it. There will never be a perfect time. You'll never have enough money. You just got to go. You have to just go. Find something. Make sure, though, when you go, it's something you're passionate about. Make it something you really, really want to live day in and day out. And this is true, I think, both of solo builders and product managers, because if I'm a product manager and maybe I don't have something specific that I want to build, I want to find somebody who is building something that I really love. And so maybe there's something a tool that I use that I find as a product manager, or not in product management, but in some hobby. Let's say I don't know, I'm a snowboarder who happens to be a product manager, and there's this really amazing app that just came out, that, I don't know, tracks something or other, or something to do with snowboarding. I would reach out to those folks and say, hey, listen, I love your app. I'm a product manager. As a user, here are the 3 things that I think would be great in this. I'd love to be involved. Don't even worry about like cost or whatever. Like, let me just get involved. Or even offer ideas or offer feedback. I love to offer feedback. If I were a product manager, I think I'd approach it that way. Or really, what you really want to find is a founder who needs somebody to do product. And there are places you can go. You can look, like on sites like Y Combinator, YC. They're always looking for people who are for new aspiring startups. There's other sites that you can go to. But whether you're a solo builder or a product manager, make sure you're doing something you're passionate about. Don't just do it because you think you'll make money. Is not a great reason to do it. Not it's a solo founder or somebody who's being a product manager outside of a big company or whatever. Obviously, if you're working for a big company, then the money is a good reason to do it. But if you're going to go through the journey yourself, make sure it's something you really, really want to do, because there'll be good days and bad days. And on the bad days, you really still got to believe it, and you still got to love it, or you'll give up. But if you have found that thing, my advice career-wise is just go for it. And by the way, you don't have to quit your job. You don't have to, just do it on the side. Like, do it at night, do it on the weekends, do it whatever. If it takes a little longer, that's fine, but get started. If you don't get started, it's not going to happen. So get started.
I think that's great advice. Thank you, Julian. I was gonna ask Tatev, do we have any questions from the audience?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
So give me a second. I will start reading one of those in a second. So the first question is, aspiring PM career transitioner, someone from the team, they are asking, so, hi Julian, I'm transitioning into product management from a marketing background. Since you come into product without formal training, what resources or habits help you ramp up and build confidence the most?
Build confidence the most? Yeah, I gotcha. First of all, I think it's great that you're coming from marketing to product. Like I said, I came from content to product. I would say a couple of things. First of all, like I said, for that first thing that you're looking for, you may not have a lot of selection. You want to try and find something you're interested in. But again, if it comes down to something you're really interested in versus something that you can do right now, do right now. If you have any opportunity from someone to do it, then do it. As far as the skill set, and I do think, while I don't have any certifications or anything like that, I do think learning about it is important. In places like this, like here at PMA, and, I know there are some courses here and things like that. It's not even so much of getting the certification, though obviously that is of value as well, but just getting the knowledge and understanding how it works and getting the skills, I think is a very valuable thing to do. And look, at the end of the day, when it's something new, you're going to make mistakes. There's going to be, things that you're like, I mean, look, I've been doing this now for over 2 years, and there are things I go back at 2 years ago, I'm like, oh, why did I do that? I should never have done that. That was stupid. But I didn't know. You're going to make mistakes. It's okay. Learn as you go. Be open to the fact that you don't know, what you don't know, as they say. And also, and then the last thing, and I've mentioned it a couple of times today, there are skills from your previous career or previous gig that you can bring to this. Like I said, if you were in marketing, then you at least know how to talk to people, right? You probably have a skill set already that you're able to, get feedback from people and really, communicate with them, because that was part of marketing, right? Is getting people's interest. So I would say that's my other piece is bring the skills that you've already learned and already have from your other job. Don't feel like you're completely starting over. Inevitably, and like I said at the beginning, I was actually in Hollywood first before I did travel rewards. And there are and people say, oh, well, you were a film and TV director and writer. Nothing that you do there is relevant to travel rewards. That's completely wrong. It's completely couldn't be further from the truth. The skill set I learned of telling a story in my time in Hollywood is then something that I brought to doing content in travel rewards, because at the end of the day, it's still telling a story. Travel is still a story about a trip and about an adventure and about a journey. So don't think that your old skills are useless. There are pieces of them that you will be able to bring to product management.
Thank you, Julian. Any other questions?
Yes. So Alex is asking, I'm early in my PM career and sometimes struggle with turning vague ideas into something actionable. How did you approach building a first version of PointsPath without getting overwhelmed or stuck in perfectionism?
That is a great question. So how did I start? Because you're right. When I first sat down in sort of April 2023, and one of the first things I formed the company, and that Delaware Corporation or whatever, and that's just paperwork. And I had a little of my own money that I put into the company's account. And then I was like, all right, now what? I know what I want to build, and I know, what I think is going to be my product, but I now what? And I think the way to not, and it can feel very overwhelming because you're like, I got, what do I do? I found it was very helpful to take it step by step, one little bite at a time. I knew in what PointsPath is today, there's probably nothing in there, and now it's a much bigger product than it started as. There's probably nothing in there that didn't at some point 2 years ago was in my head somewhere. But I had to say, okay, I can't possibly do all that to start. I got to start somewhere. So like I said, I just built a prototype or hired somebody to build a prototype that just did one airline. I've heard somebody say the best way to start something with product is to figure out what is the absolute most basic, simplest version of this that I could build. Like pull all the features out. What's the most simple version that I could build that would be of use to somebody? For me, it was one airline, just one airline program, and go from there. Because even that, people could look at that and say, oh, okay, yeah, I see how that's going to work. Like people do have an imagination, and you can see like, oh, if this does one airline, it'd be great if it did 12, or whatever. So I think the way to avoid being overwhelmed is reduce what you're trying to do to the most basic version, and then take it one little step at a time. And just say, all right, well, so now I'm just going to build a prototype with one airline. Okay, now I did that. Now I'm going to take that and make it 3 airlines or whatever. I'm going to do that. Then I'm going to start adding recommendations where I'm going to say, okay, for each of these prices, I'm going to say use cash or use miles. Like add it one little step at a time. It's okay if it takes a little longer that way, because it becomes a much more feasible and controlled project. And I think, right, Ross, again, you know better than I do. I think that's really what product management is all about, right? Is figuring out what those little steps are. In the film business, we used to say making a film is like eating an elephant one spoonful at a time. And I think that making a product might be the same thing.
I think that's excellent advice and a great answer, because I think it really goes with anything. You don't want to bite off more than you can chew. And I think that helps build confidence, and it gets you to the second step and the third step as you move along. I don't know, Tatev, if we have time for maybe one more quick question. Otherwise, we'll start to close up. Are there any quick questions?
Yeah, we have one from Jade. Here's the question. I came from a software engineering background, and I'm trying to strengthen my business and user thinking muscles. What advice would you give to someone technical who wants to think more like a product founder?
That's interesting, because I hear almost 2 different questions there. How do I think more like a product manager, and then how do I also think like a business person? And there's overlap there. They're different, but they're also the same, right? And I think that all goes back, if you talk to any founder, any business person who I think really knows what they're doing, the first question, at least especially at the startup level, isn't how are we going to make millions of dollars? It's how am I going to make something people want? And I think that's on product and business. It goes all the way back to what we started with. What does the customer want? What is the customer looking for? If I build something that the customer wants, I could probably figure out how to make money from it, even if it means attaching something else to it or whatever it might be. Right now with PointsPath, we're fortunate we're bringing in good revenue, but we actually bring in more revenue from all those emails I mentioned, from our email list and our email engagement, than we do from subscriptions on the product. Do I care? No. As long as we're making money, I don't care where the money's coming from. But that goes to show you, and look, at the end, over time that may change, of course, but what it goes to show you is that I wasn't so worried about how do I make money off of this. I was thinking, is this something people are going to want? If it's something they want, you'll figure out a way to make money from it. So I think from a business perspective and a product perspective, both, go back to start by thinking about the customer and start from there. And you probably, if you do that, and you do that every step of the way, and by the way, as you get further into it, and then you'll be like, oh, but I'm making money, I want to do this. You got to keep thinking of the customer. You got to keep thinking of the customer. You got to keep thinking of the customer. Even when there might be financial reasons to be like, well, maybe we'll do this instead. You got to keep thinking of the customer. I think that is really the answer. So that would be my advice, is when you're wearing either of those hats, the customer comes first.
Well, I just want to say thank you, Julian. This has been for your time, of course. But I think this has been a truly inspiring session. Thank you for pulling back the curtain and walking us through your story. I hope everyone here today is leaving with something useful, whether it's a mindset shift Maybe it was a tip, or simply some reassurance that it's okay to build while you learn. You're not going to know everything before you start. I think one of the questions was about, just start, right? Just get going. So I think that should wrap up our session. Just before we leave, we have an upcoming event in 2 weeks with featuring Steve Johnson. He's the co-founder and CEO of Product Growth Leaders. We're gonna have a nice conversation on the history of product management. So I think that would be very informative. So I encourage you to join in and learn with me. And we are teeing up a PMA Coaches Corner. So we're going to have a session with some of our PMA coaches. There'll be an opportunity to hear their expertise, the challenges that they can help you solve and get through. So I encourage you to keep an eye out on our event calendar for all of our upcoming events. I encourage you to join the PMA community if you're interested in growing your career. We have a lot of resources. We're all about supporting one another and providing resources to help you grow in your career. So I encourage you to check us out. And I want to thank you again for joining. And I want to thank our special guest, Julian Kheel, of course, and Tatip. Thank you for facilitating. Have a great day.
Thank you all. Bye.
Thanks, Ross.